Hello again, everyone. My name is James, and I am the Director of Customer Engagement at Haulix. I'm also the host of the Haulix Live programming. Haulix, if you don't know, is a digital promotional distribution platform, meaning that record labels like our guest today from Metal Blade and Prosthetic use it to share new and unreleased music with people in the media. You can try it yourself by visiting haulix.com. That's HAULIX.com. And if you sign up today, you get a free 30-day trial. It's pretty cool. But today we're going to talk about metal PR. Well, PR in general, but from two people that I really love that have some working knowledge of the world of metal. So we'll start with you, Becky. Do you want to just give us a quick introduction, who you are and what your role is in the music business?
Yeah, sure. My name is Becky. I have been a publicist for 13 years now. And whilst there are definitely people who've been doing it longer than me, when I first started doing this, I don't even know how long has Haulix been going. I don't remember using Haulix when I first started.
It's 12 years now.
Well, there you go. Just the first year I was all at sea without Haulix, and I was mailing out CDRs as promos. But yeah, over the years I have worked with various labels and independent artists, Relapse, Earache, and for the last year and a half, I've been working with Prosthetic, and that's sort of my main squeeze. I also work for Roban Festival in the Netherlands, and every now and again still squeeze in a freelance thing here and there to keep my ear to the ground, see what's going on. But yeah, I've been at Prosthetic for about 18 months now, and we're just quite a small team. There's only 5 of us, but spread out around the globe. And yeah, I look after all the bands there.
I mean, that's a strong introduction. I love it. Vince, what do you got?
I've been at Metal Blade since 2007. And
Wow.
When I started there, I was brought on board to merely do college radio promotions. And it became immediately apparent that a new era of media was brewing. When I started, I actually started the first Metal Blade Facebook group before pages existed. I was designing MySpace pages and bought a camera, and I've been doing video and graphic and photography work since. I ran publicity for a short time. I don't feel I have the disposition to run PR as the main PR person. I'm much better served on the graphic side, but I still do all the radio promo. So I talk to the folks at SiriusXM, Music Choice, Full Metal Jackie, college and commercial radio nationwide, and some in Canada. So as Becky, I'm sure, can attest, at a small label, you end up, your roles cross over to many other departments.
Yeah.
That you might not have that experience at a larger company. I have friends that work at Blizzard, for instance, that they do one thing and they don't know some of the people at their company. It's a lot different at a small label.
Yeah.
Well, look at your humble brag knowing people at Blizzard. Good,
well,
strong start.
That's actually part of the fun of the metal industry, right? Is when you find people in like gaming or something else, they're all excited to meet you, but you're way more excited about their job. It happens all the time.
Yes, the cool industry that everyone thinks they want to be a part of. I love it to death. Now, you guys both have a long time in the industry. All things considered, you have both crossed the threshold of lifers at this point. Can you really see yourself ever doing anything else?
No. I mean, yes, something different maybe within, I don't know. I mean, sometimes like when if I've had a bad week, I'm kind of like, I don't know if I don't want to be a publicist anymore. This is too hard. But I can't, I mean, at Prosthetic, I started doing more than just publicity. But I think I'm always going to think of myself as a publicist. And I think, I don't know, the industry is changing all the time. And I think the job of a publicist is going to change a lot over the next few years as the way we consume music changes and the way we learn about music and the way media is changing. So I think the job of a publicist is not going to stay as it is. But yeah, I think I'll always be doing something along these lines.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a really good question. And the grass is always greener is certainly an expression that applies. I'd love to go and work in the gaming world or something else. But I know once you get under the hood, you're turning something that is a cool hobby and something that you love into a job, and you have to kind of be mentally prepared for that. I've already done that with music. Do I want to do that with something else, or would I just go back to a regular, more traditional job? I don't know at this point. I'm been doing this for so long now that my day-to-day in 2 years is going to be so different anyway, just because it is changing so much. So I don't know if I could do anything else right now, at least unless I was specifically forced to.
I don't know.
Maybe we'll
Yeah.
just evolve with, as things evolve, we'll evolve with it, I guess.
Yeah, that's the hope. I definitely wouldn't want to, like you said, Vince, I made my passion my job, and I don't know if I would want to do that to any of the other areas of my life. I don't know if I like anything else as much, but I also know the cost of doing that, and I don't think I could do it to 2 areas of my life.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you guys, let's get the elephant in the room out of the way first. We are in month 8, 9, whatever of the pandemic at this point. And, everything's obviously different. I don't know if either of you have been to an office since March. So tell me right off the bat here, how are you doing? How are you faring in your home office? What's life been like these last few months? Have you adjusted well? I can't even say, are you adjusting? At this point, you either have or it's not going to happen. So did you adjust well? What's it been like?
I mean, I work from home anyway. So in a day-to-day sense, when it comes to work, that's not really changed that much. I still get up, walk downstairs, come into my office, and I'm here. But I think the lack of being able to go anywhere else certainly makes it feel a lot more claustrophobic. But yeah, I mean, I'm very used to communicating with people remotely. I think that's, again, one of the facets of how the industry has changed. Over the years, it's much easier to do that. And I think it would have been a lot harder to cope with that if, the technology and stuff wasn't there to enable that. But yeah, on a day-to-day basis, my life hasn't changed that much. Although the only place I go now is to walk the dog rather than to go to gigs or do anything fun outside of my office. So yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, my day-to-day is I'm at home now, and fortunately I have a really nice studio set up. I had kind of been positioning myself to work partially at home because I had found that when I really try to tackle a big video project, it's really helpful to work at home, distraction-free. And now that I'm working from home all of the time, I'm finding that I really do like feedback sometimes. So I often find myself in a creative rut where I have to bounce something off someone, and doing that remotely is a lot more difficult. And it's peaks and valleys, right? There are some days I feel amazing and productive. There's other days I want to drive my car as fast as I can off the end of the Santa Monica Pier with the back full of cinder blocks. Like it's just mental health wavers, and you have to be able to manage it and say, it's probably time I shut down my email for a while before I send an email I'll regret. And for me, that's sometimes a challenge.
Yeah, I would say that I've been in a similar place. We work from home forever at Haulix. That's just what we do. We've been fully remote for years now. And as much as I feel like I was prepared for this, I wasn't prepared for, like, my partner, for example. She works at Live Nation. She's been home this whole time as well. And so we got a whole new sense of how much we like each other over the last several months. And there's that, but also just the email thing you mentioned. Like I have days where I feel like I checked an email the other day from one of our international clients at 7 in the morning, and then at 8 o'clock at night, I'm like still hobbled away in front of my camera or something like that, working on something. And I'm like, I think I spend like 14 hours a day working now. And I mean, maybe I always did that, but because you don't leave the space, I think you're maybe more aware of it.
There used to always be a reason to finish work. There'd be somewhere to go afterwards, even if it was like, just going out like to meet a friend or going to a class. I mean, I can't go swimming. I really miss going swimming. So there'd be an excuse to finish work, whereas now there isn't. So it's kind of like, as the emails keep coming in, it's harder to just go, I'm just going to leave those ones and come back tomorrow. So yeah,
oddly, I was getting really burned out with shows at the beginning of this year, which now seems an odd thing, but yeah, I would love to go to a show and see some of my friends in bands. That would be amazing.
Yeah, it is weird. I remember at the beginning of the year, I had I think right before the pandemic hit, I had made a tweet where I had posted like all these different states I was going to go to, like one per month, to go to different gigs and do all this cool stuff. And then it was like, can you do it digitally? And then everything was just like, oh, I guess I'll just hang out in this one room of my apartment for the majority of 2020.
Yeah.
This is where I live now.
And to that end, we're pretty unbelievably fortunate to have jobs where this is a possibility at all.
Mhm.
There are definitely people that are far less fortunate with their jobs, that they can't work remotely. They have to put themselves in harm's way, or they don't have a job at all.
Yeah,
You're absolutely right. We are complaining while still being on top of the mountain.
Yeah,
Which
I
is,
think everybody has the right to complain in their own little corner of the universe, but I think you at least have to have some sort of perspective, or try to, on those days where you feel like driving your car off the end of a pier.
Well, at least there wouldn't be many people on the pier, most likely.
No, that's the thing. Yeah.
Well, I want to know, how I have a few things I would like to talk about in terms of like how your efforts to promote artists have gone, but I hope that we can use some specific examples. So, starting with you, Vince, you guys had a pretty big release, like literally 5 weeks after we all went into lockdown. You guys had this Black Dahlia Murder release come out, and that band is maybe they were really well positioned for something like this, if only because they've already developed a pretty good online following that is already very engaged online. But I was curious, as being this what was a big release for the label and for the scene in general, so close to when everything changed, like what was it like in Metal Blade HQ to kind of pivot at the last minute?
Well, fortunately with that album, Kareem at Night Shift is such a big part of Black Dahlia Murder's success, and a big part of that pre-order. That pre-order had already done what it was going to do really before shutdown really affected anybody. I know there were some shipping issues on Kareem's end as it got closer, but as far as our assets and all the things we needed to launch that album, everything was essentially in the can. So we were pretty lucky. Shift it a month in the other direction, and it might have been more difficult. I mean, the band had already shot their music video. Really, it messed up the band's plans of going on tour and their income for the year. So the album did great. And it was just one of those things where we realized we were really lucky that it came out when it did. I don't know. It was just kind of, we're like, well, here we are. Let's just keep promoting this and hope for the best. And that's kind of how we've been this whole time, is bands are still delivering records and we're still putting them out. It's just a function of that now, how do we promote it? But Black Dahlia was largely a traditional release up until that point.
And I feel like in that specific release that Trevor is a guy who's very game to do whatever he needs to do to promote the record. Because I realized, like, as soon as that happened, he was doing every interview somebody threw at him. He was just, every day there was a new piece of content. And I was like, how does this guy even have time to take this many interviews, let alone the mental capacity to do it without wanting to scream?
Yeah, no, Becky might be able to speak to this, but a lot of that, in my experience, is driven by press in Europe. Bands that do a lot of interviews will, generally speaking, do far more interviews from Europe as a whole than the US. There's just more outlets there covering bands in that traditional capacity, where there are far fewer in the US that care about doing an interview at this point. It's just not what's generating clicks.
Yeah, Becky, pivoting to you in a much more recent release, you guys have just had a really good amount of success with the debut album from Undeath, Legions of a Different Kind. It charted really well, but I was curious, that's a band putting out their first album, and while they are considered, something of an underground sensation, and they were really getting a lot of energy going into this year, I'm curious what it was like to approach promoting a debut album from a band in a time where you couldn't be like, go see them on the road.
Well, I think there was quite a lot of momentum behind that band before we were even involved. And I think it kind of, we obviously had faith in them and we believed in them. That's why we wanted to work with them. But I think it still took us a bit by surprise when we announced the album and how quickly it started to sell and pre-orders. And at this point, we're now waiting. We can't keep it in stock. It just keeps selling out. So they sold 2,000 copies on vinyl, and it's been out, I don't know, a month now. So there was definitely a lot of momentum with that band before we were even involved, and they've done bits and pieces of press before, but they've not, like, this might be a strange thing to say as a publicist, but I don't think the press is the main driver for the interest in the band, certainly initially. And I think, the press has picked up on it, and they've had some cool things. They were in Rolling Stone, which I think was a bucket list tick off for them. Yeah, I think it's the momentum that they had, and the attitude they have, that they're sort of game for doing anything. And I put an interview in front of them and it's done like 24 hours later. I think that will take them a long way. They certainly still have the enthusiasm for doing any interview I put in front of them, which is great for me. And I think, yeah, they've got a good attitude, and, they played before we were not able to play. They played plenty, and they started building up a fan base. And I think that's where the momentum has come from their live shows. And as soon as they can get back out on the road, I'm sure they will be.
Absolutely. And it is a ripper of a record. So, I mean, people aren't wrong. Yeah, it's great. Now, I want to talk about the marketing and just general engagement stuff that has really been working for your artists around this time. And, I want to talk about first the artists that are really putting out a lot of, extra material right now, or, the strength of covers. We've seen a lot of B-sides. We've seen a lot of albums. We've seen a lot of reimaginings, things that are not what they might have put out otherwise this year. So Becky, since we were talking about one prosthetic release, let's just move on to another one that you guys did recently. You had this 4-stroke Baron record, Mono Queen, came out. They had some really outside the box covers, like things I don't think people would expect them to have done.
Yeah.
Did you feel like that was a successful move for them to go so far outside of what people would maybe expect if you said metal band doing covers?
Well, the strange thing about that release is that it was planned before this pandemic happened. And I think it kind of fulfills the same sort of thing that a lot of bands have done on purpose during the pandemic. They're kind of like bands that maybe don't want to release a full album, so they're doing covers or they're doing EPs. And I can certainly see the logic behind that for bands that kind of want to keep up some momentum. They want to stay engaged with their fan base. They maybe want to try and make some money as well. That whole thing. But yeah, for 4-Stroke Baron, they had this plan to do this before the pandemic. So it kind of serendipitous, I think, that it worked out this way. And I think I still think the end result is the same. It fulfills the same principle. It still has kept some momentum going for the band, who will have a new album out next year, which is already underway. And I think, it kind of keeps them in the public eye, and yeah, it keeps things going with them when they really can't play shows and do any of that sort of stuff. But yeah, I think some of the choices that they put for covers, I mean, I didn't know what to expect before I heard them. But they're unique. Like, they're a unique band. Like, I mean, one of the conversations I have with bands all the time is talking about how they want to be, like, how to categorize them, like how to describe them, like descriptions that they're comfortable with, where they think they fit in. And they just say, well, we're a pop band, or we're a heavy pop band. And I think that comes through in the covers they've done as well, like the sort of music they've chosen to be part of their back catalogue. I think it works well.
Yeah. And as consumers, both of you, have you enjoyed this kind of onslaught of B-sides and other rarities that have come out this year? Like, do you like that approach of, let's just give them whatever we have in our archives, or let's do something like that doesn't require us to spend $30,000?
I don't know that there's much in the prosthetic or metal blade that costs $30,000.
I was trying to just give you some credit,
Yeah.
People have
So that's a big thing. Fans, I think, don't realize is what a small scale we're really dealing with. Becky just said they had a band sell 2,000 copies of vinyl. That's absolutely massive.
Yeah,
we have a warehouse full of vinyl for bands that said their fans would buy vinyl. And there are, for every success story of we sold out of vinyl, there's like 15, oh hell, we're sitting on 800 copies of vinyl that are costing us money every month.
Yeah.
So when vinyl sells out, bands get mad and don't realize we have to run numbers that we know we can sell out. Otherwise it's wildly costly on our end.
Yeah.
So measuring expectations is a big part of what we do, both just for bands to make sure, like, look, this is what we can do. And this is why, because these are the numbers we have from previous sales and previous albums. For example, Rivers and Isle, Where Else Know My Name was a smash success, an unexpected one. Europe, our European office said, look, Monarchy didn't perform well here. We're not going to do it physically. It's going to be digital only. Owls came out and it was immediate demand over there, and they had to catch up pressing copies. But because they did that, the reason they did that is because Monarchy just didn't perform. And they're like, well, we'll see what it does and hopefully build the band up a little bit more slowly. And that's a lot of what we do, is trying to build bands over time. We're not trying to find the next Ghost. I'm sorry, this is a tangent. I'm so sick of people saying, oh, we need to find the next Slipknot or Ghost. No, you don't, because you don't have any functional control over that. When I first was working Ghost, nobody cared. It was fans that drove it. Radio stations didn't reply about the band. Press didn't reply about the band. It was only once it was already selling that people thought, oh, maybe we should pay attention to this. So fans as a group really drive the entire business, and we're just trying to keep the train on the tracks, more or less.
I have to say as well, I think, like, although it's a strange thing to say, again, I think, I mean, a lot of things are strange things to say. I've said a lot of things this year I never thought I would say. But it's not been a bad year, I don't think, for, I mean, speaking broadly for record labels. It's been a difficult year. There's been challenges that are unprecedented, as there have been in many industries, but a lot of stuff that we've had to do has felt difficult. But the what's happened with the Undeath album has been a real bright spot for me. Like, and again, like I say, I don't really think that's really particularly driven by press, although they have done plenty of press. But the fact, like Finn says, that they can sell 2,000 copies on vinyl, never mind other formats, like, it's brilliant. And it gives me, it sounds a bit cheesy, but it gives me a lot of hope, and it makes me realize that the music industry, or this part of it at least, is still healthy. There is still interest, and there is demand for bands doing on their debut album. I think it's been a real positive for me to work with them.
Yeah, and on that consumer end, the question you actually asked, I've bought more band merch online this year than I probably ever have.
Yeah.
And shipped it internationally too, for the artists that just for some reason their managers can't fathom why they need to create merch shops on both continents, so consumers can buy, so fans don't have to pay international shipping. Why medium to large size bands aren't taking care of that business still baffles me to this day. I don't get it.
Yeah, I bought a lot of more physical music. Maybe I haven't, I don't know. I used to buy a lot of merch and records and stuff at shows, but so maybe I'm just more conscious of doing it and spending my money online now. But I like a lot of the covers and stuff like that. I like a lot of, like, what for example, like 2 Minutes to Late Night have done. I think that's quite nice. I think it, like, just shows a different, like, side to the bands. It, like, shows a bit of their personality, and I don't know, I think that is one of the things that people will take away from this year, maybe, is that they sort of realize that there's a more human side to some of the bands that, like, they don't necessarily interact with in that way usually.
Yeah, 2 Minutes to Late Night and Metal Injection's Slay at Home Fest is insanely cool, and the amount of work that Frank does every month to put that together, I'm not envious of that amount of coordination and editing.
Yeah,
for sure.
I have also bought a lot of merch this year, and if I'm buying, if I have the option to add even just a digital download to the regular merch, I generally will, just to, give them that extra sale and give them, a few extra bucks, even if I don't need the download necessarily, because I am a big streaming person. I'm more than happy to, buy the $40 sweatshirt with the $5 digital download bundle. Like, why not?
When the pandemic first sort of started taking hold and people were furloughed or sent home from work or made redundant, there were a lot of bands, I think, who and labels who sort of instinctively were sort of like, help our bands out, buy our merch, they're off the road, which is all legitimate, and I'm not being down on them at all. I think, like, and people are still doing it to this day, and I think it's necessary, and for people to understand that for bands to continue, they do need an income. But one of the things that I felt quite strongly about at the beginning of this was that whilst the bands are, losing their income. There are a lot of fans that are losing their income as well. And I think what Bandcamp have done with Bandcamp Fridays has been an incredible thing for artists. But one of the things that I really wanted to do was, we'd been talking about doing a prosthetic sampler for a little while, and this just gave us the impetus to get it out and put it up on Bandcamp, and it was free to download, but plenty of people paid for it. And we've done 3 this year, 3 different samplers, and they're all free. But we really I wanted to make sure that people could still experience new music, even if they don't have the money to.
And that's complicated, right? Like, pay what you want on Bandcamp. It sounds like a simple idea, but you have to deal with, in some cases, artists just waiving royalties.
Yeah.
For that to be, because there's minimum royalties that have to be paid to artists for the sale of a song, mechanical royalties. No matter what, they always get paid that. So to do that, it's artists, labels, and managers working together to say, look, this is what we're doing and why. Here's what everybody's going to get. It has to be clear from the beginning. So that there are a lot of moving pieces in the background. And again, royalties aren't my apartment, or my department. So I only know things peripherally, but there's things online that fans say, why don't you just do X? Well, there's a reason, and the legal I's and T's need to be crossed and dotted. Otherwise, someone's going to have a bad time.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it has been interesting to see the Bandcamp approach. I think has worked really well. And I have become accustomed now, even if I don't think I would if I don't plan on buying the album, that when I hear a new record that I want, I instinctively am like, let me go find the merch. Like, I remember tweeting at Undeath when I first heard Legions to be like, let me know where I can buy their merch, which by the way is holymountainprinting.com. A lot of stuff there. And I was immediately like, let me buy, instead of just buying one shirt, I'm going to buy like 2 or 3, because this is my way of buying a ticket later on down the line, or buying something else.
Yeah.
Let's talk about, while we're on this train of other ways to make money and keeping the band going and engagement and stuff, Vince, this is your moment to shine here, because you are the Twitch guy, not just in the world of metal, but I've talked to a lot of people this year who is like, that Vince guy has figured out how to help bands do Twitch well.
That's weird. I don't necessarily consider myself an expert so much as just I enjoy it and I try to learn about it. We've since started working with Twitch a little bit more. And the crazy thing about Twitch, and Becky, this will blow your mind, they reply to emails. There are human beings at Twitch that respond to emails. Nobody at Facebook responds to emails. Maybe support, maybe. I have someone at YouTube that will reply with a form response. Nobody at Twitter. It's about the only platform I've worked with in my entire time at Metal Blade since I used to talk to Steve Bush at MySpace in 2008. Only time I felt like we had someone to work with, and that's not including Spotify or Apple where they have people. But Twitch is something that artists should do if they enjoy doing it. It sounds obvious, right? But I've only been able to get a couple of artists to really latch onto Twitch and do it for real. The last conversation I had with Twitch, they recommend artists, musicians stream 30 hours a month minimum. And there aren't that many artists that are really willing to do that. The biggest success story is of course Herman Lee, who came into our office a couple of years back, and I brought him over to my desk, and I said, Herman, people are already playing Dragonforce music on Twitch. You should just think about doing that. And I didn't think anything of it. And like a month later, he hit me up and he had it all set up. And he's an IT wizard, so he doesn't have any problem with any of the tech issues. And he's built a pretty complicated setup. And it's really opened up Dragonforce. The new Dragonforce record outperformed the previous 2. It wasn't even close. We had a lot of trouble selling Dragonforce vinyl until this album. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that they had so much fan outreach on Twitch, to the point where Twitch was working with them. They played TwitchCon 2019 in San Diego, which is insane. That when have you seen a social platform put a metal band at a convention on a live stream? It just doesn't happen. It's never, Twitter's never going to have a metal band perform. Facebook's never going to do that, but Twitch has. And in metal, that's why I talked about like Blizzard earlier. We gravitate towards the people that understand what we're doing, because you have to understand metal. And Twitch, in my experience so far, really does. Some of the other streamers that we work with, Bo Looters from Harm's Way is a big streamer. He plays Rocksmith and takes requests, and he's got a really cool setup. But artists can make supplemental income on Twitch. It takes a hell of a lot of work, but you only need a few dozen to low hundred streamers or viewers, if that. to really start to generate ad revenue and then set up that Streamlabs donate button. And we've had some weird experiences with artists accepting donations, right? With Patreon or whatever service it is, where there was discussions for a long time as to whether or not that's appropriate. Some artists are just adamantly against it. But my feeling on that is, if you think it's appropriate for someone to donate money to Dr. Disrespect and not an up-and-coming death metal band from the UK, you're out of your goddamn mind. So any way you can support an artist, especially if they're performing for you free on Twitch, Twitch just really, to really sum it up, Twitch really provides a way for fans to contribute directly to artists of all ilks in a way that's comfortable for everybody. And no service has really nailed that outside of Patreon, in my experience. Did that answer anything? I don't know.
No, I think it did, because I was going to ask about, just why you gravitate towards it, for example, and the success you've seen. And I was going to comment that I've noticed, and maybe it's just because of the sphere that I tend to exist within, but I feel like heavier artists have been the first to really find a big following and commit to it. Because even outside of the artists that are represented between the two of you, Matt from Trivium has a gigantic following on Twitch. And even he taught me yoga last year, back when we could hang out together, and he streamed it on Twitch while he did it. And I was just like, what is happening? What are we doing right now? And Ryan from Fit for a King, same thing. He's on Twitch. I get the notification all the time. And I feel like this is a community that 5 years ago, if you're going to be like, there's a streaming platform that's going to be almost tailor-made for the Venn diagram of metal fans and gamers, I wouldn't have believed you. But here,
and you know what I found? And Trevor from Black Dahlia told me I was right. I told him before he tried streaming on Twitch, it's different than the other platforms. You're not going to see the hate and vitriol you'll see on Instagram comments, which for some reason is one of the worst. And he finally streamed on Twitch, and he emailed me a couple days later and said, you were totally right. It was a really good time. It does have that community vibe. And I think people that view Twitch, for the most part, there's always going to be a few outliers. For the most part, there's an understanding that the creator, whomever it is allowing a portal into their world, and there's some respect there. On Twitch uniquely, probably on YouTube a little bit as well, but I find it to be probably one of the better platforms out there.
That's a really good point. I hadn't really thought of the community, because when you said that, I was like, I don't think I've ever really seen hate on Twitch. Not, at least not.
It certainly happens,
volume.
but it's with a much, I feel it's much less frequent.
You got to really hate somebody to be like, I'm going to seek out their Twitch channel and just watch them do stuff.
Yeah, I'm going to seek out their Twitch channel, sit through a 30-second ad, and then they're going to hear it from me, the person with all this extra time.
Yeah, after I've given them a few fractions of a penny, then I'll tell them how I feel.
Right, yeah.
Well, if there was ever going to be a time for that kind of behavior, it would be doing it today. And if they're not doing it, then it should be all right.
Yeah, and the thing that bums me out there are so many artists not trying anything right now. And maybe they've got day jobs or whatever, but I'm really trying to encourage more artists to be involved. And not just sit at home and wait for this to be over. Position yourself for the future right now. There's never been a better time. I would love to sit here and create assets for an artist Twitch more than almost anything else I'd have to do for my job. So that's really it.
I think that message though, expands outside of Twitch, which isn't for everybody. And like you said, not everybody has the 30 hours or whatever to invest in it. But I feel like one of the things that I have repeated a lot this year, more than usual, is about how people will discover your band this year is different. Like, nobody's going to see you playing a festival and just stumble across your music that way. No one's going to see you supporting a bigger band and go, well, this is cool, I'm going to buy a piece of merch. So the way most people are going to discover your band this year is through their phone screen or their computer. And therefore what you look like or how you present yourself is more important than ever, I think. And being out there and existing is the first step of that. Yeah,
you can't disappear. I have a really good example for that. And yeah, one of our biggest struggles for any record, it doesn't matter who it is, just letting people know it exists. That's it. I went to school for marketing advertising, and a lot of what I learned there is outdated now, but it's really, our advertising is as many impressions as we can get with hopefully the right people. But what Twitch allows is for a lot more passive discovery. like you would in a Spotify playlist or something. But for example, Blake from Between a Berry to Me is a fantastic Twitch streamer. He's got a great setup. He takes requests. He plays drums. What more could you want? At the end of one of his streams, he did a raid, and a raid is when you send all of your viewers to another channel when you're finished. So if you've got a few dozen people watching you, you can say, all right, who's streaming right now? And then send all those viewers to the other streamer. And they'll see that you did that and go, oh, crap, that's amazing. So Blake did a raid on another drummer's Twitch stream, one of the more prominent Twitch stream drummers. I can't remember his name offhand. He knew Blake from Twitch. He just said, oh, Blake, that's great. I love your streams. Thanks. He had no idea who Between the Berry to Me was. So he spent 5 minutes listening to BT band music and talking with his several hundred, several thousand Twitch viewers about Between the Berry to Me. And that's kind of the community, like passive discovery aspect that you become part of when you're on Twitch, that you won't get on Facebook unless you give Mark Zuckerberg more money, just more credit card swipes.
Things happen in 2020 where in the moment you're like, this is the best thing I've seen all week or month. And then 3 days later, it feels like it was 6 years ago. But the Between the Buried and Me live streams on Twitch were incredibly well done. And it was so interesting to watch a band like that perform in like a house studio. Like it was like a setting you would never see otherwise. It was like an opportunity to actually witness something that you would never otherwise see the way that it was presented. And it like showcased their talent, but also just gave you a different way to look at the band. I was like, these are just, again, it's I think a lot of the job these days is to connect virtually, but also humanize yourself through doing it. Yeah. And that was like a thing where I was like, you get to see that these are guys, these are people just trying to do it.
Mm.
Yeah. People want to buy music from people they relate to and can identify with. That's it.
So the idea that these guys are playing, colors in full from what appears to be like inside someone's house, you're like, oh, okay, everyone can relate to what's happening right now.
Yeah.
And on that note, let's talk about live streaming. I want to know how you both feel about them. Have you guys been watching them? What are the conversations you guys are having with? Because when the pandemic hit, if you play anything that involves an acoustic guitar, you are on Instagram Live pretty much immediately. But for the heavier side of the music industry, there's a little bit more of a learning curve. It's like, how do we do this? How do we make it sound good? How do we make it look good? Do we pre-record it and then put it like someone Fit for King did that? Or do we, say to hell with it and we do it live? What do we do to make it look and sound good? So, how do you both feel about it? Have you been enjoying anything? Anything stand out to you in all of this?
The first one I watched back in April, I guess, was Oranzi Pazuzu, which was amazing. And I don't know, it could be partly because they were one of the first, but I think theirs was very well produced. And it was, I wouldn't say it was quite as good as watching them live, but it was very enjoyable. And I think kind of much like what Vince was just saying about any kind of streaming or online engagement, I kind of think you kind of have to really want to do it. Like you have to commit to it, because I do think that bands that kind of like, well, we could broadcast something from our rehearsal studio and we might as well put it up. I don't think people engage with it. I just don't think if they don't feel the enthusiasm for it, it doesn't translate and people aren't engaged. And so I've definitely seen lots of mediocre live streams. And I would say, I think there may be a little bit of fatigue for some of those sorts of shows. And I think putting some effort and some thought into how you're going to present a live stream is necessary. And I think it would be remiss of me to not mention Vile Creature here, who had a whole tour booked around the release of their album, obviously cancelled. And we really wanted them to do a live stream, and they were kind of like, we thought, it should be quite easy. There's two people in the band, they live together, they're married. Like, how hard can it be to get these people on the same page to do a live stream? And they were quite reluctant at first, and they were kind of, if we do it, we want to do it in our own way. And they really did. And they got Tanya from Bismuth, another one of our bands, who's a coder, and she essentially built them a website. It was how can I phrase this, because we got a cease and desist for using the phrase choose your own adventure. I hope I'm allowed to say it here, you know, who knows. But we weren't labeling it as that, but it was a choose your own adventure live show. So it was a pick your own path and stuff like that. But so basically when you logged on and you could pay, it was pay what you want, but you could go to their show, and they had filmed it in advance, but there were I think 9 different camera angles, so you could watch the whole show from next to the drummer. You could go outside for a cigarette, you could go to the merch booth, and they had planned this whole thing out so you could experience the show however you wanted to experience the show. And I think they had a few thousand people watch it. I think you can still watch it. I think it's still up, glorylive.com, and yeah, you can still go and pick your camera angles. And I think doing something like that was very on brand for them. It suited what they were doing, and people engaged with it. And there was a chat room the whole way through. Like when you got there, like doors were at 7, show starts at 8. People were logging in and talking to people, hundreds of people in the chat room, and then they will experience the show. And I think doing something like that is not possible for everybody, but when you can put your own spin on something which is otherwise could be a bit generic, I think it really makes a big difference.
That's a very 2020 thing to learn, that choose your own adventure can get you a cease and desist.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't have assumed, but I guess it makes sense. It's probably a registered trademark from whatever book publisher does those.
Yeah,
of course.
I guess
someone owns it. Yeah. It was one of those things where at first you're like, what? And then your business brain is like, I guess. Yeah. Well, what about you, Vince?
Well, one of the things I've run into on Twitch, artists saying, well, someone's already doing this. Well, yeah, but that someone isn't you. You have fans that care about seeing you. So it really varies by tech literacy of the band, their situation, whether or not they're all together or separated, because so many bands aren't in the same city anymore. So it really depends. I watched a Leprous live stream, the second one they did, where they picked songs based on fan input or voting somehow, and had a live chat during the stream. Audio had some issues here and there that were kind of worked out during the stream, but that was a true live stream. In many cases, what you're going to see is recorded, because the complexities of running a live stream online it's a pretty giant hurdle. And even if you think everything's going to work, things can still go wrong. So it's simpler in many cases to pre-record something and do that live later. I have no problem with that at all. In fact, in a lot of ways, I prefer that. It allows us to build promo materials in advance. Just make sure things go off without a hitch, because especially if people are going to spend money, you want to make sure it's up to snuff. But there's certainly room for both. And what I would ideally like to see is artists using these experiences and hopefully enjoying them to create a live stream strategy, rather than just, we did a show in March, $10 a head, see you later. Okay. What next? I've kind of been describing Twitch internally with artists as, okay, you streamed once and there were 5 people. That means keep doing that. Your band didn't play your first 2-3 shows and say, well, there weren't that many people, we're just going to quit. I'd like to see live streaming become a much more common part of the overall strategy for bands, because as we progress in the future, COVID or not, being visible to fans is not going to become less important.
That's a really good point. And, we're getting down to the wire here. We have 15 minutes-ish left, and we do have a few questions that have come in. So we're going to pivot, and we're going to try to burn through some questions that people have asked us. So first one is kind of scenario-based. So I'm going to make up an example to go with the question, but we'll see what you both think of it. Now, this viewer wants to know, let's say you put out something that ends up being ill-timed. What is the best way to recover? So let's use an example. Let's say that you didn't think that the election last week was going to stretch on through the end of the week, and you planned your big announcement, video teaser, whatever, for Thursday or Friday. You dropped it, and much to nobody's surprise, it didn't get the attention that you thought it would. How do you recover from an ill-timed release? I know. I thought it was a strong opening question.
Yeah. I think it depends, but there's probably other factors involved. Like, it depends what it was. If it was your album dropping, that's quite different to announcing your album. like there are some things that you might do which you kind of do and you get one shot at, whereas other things like you can give them a second run round quite easily. And not to go off on too much of a tangent, I will come back to the question, but I have noticed that I think that over the last, not necessarily at the beginning of this whole situation, but certainly in the last 6 months or so, I think that the album cycle is contracted quite a lot. It's quite hard to keep the momentum going after an album is released. So some bands it's not as much of an issue, but overall it is a lot harder, I think, because typically if things are planned well, usually an album would come out and the band would be on tour, and then the live shows give you a second shot at, you know, going back to people and chasing things up and going, oh, if you missed it, why don't you come out and see them at this show, and all of that sort of stuff. So it's a lot smaller, everything feels a lot tighter, and sometimes things just go dead, you know, the week after an album comes out, and it takes a lot of effort to keep that momentum going. So I guess it is kind of, I am going off on a slight tangent, but it is kind of related to that, you know, sometimes like all you can do is keep plugging away and like resending stuff, and sometimes presenting stuff in a slightly different way makes a big difference as well. And I guess probably Vince probably has more experience with this than I do, like repackaging stuff essentially, like you know, new graphics, new way of putting stuff out there, and making it look different, and you know, going around again.
Yeah, remaining flexible where you're able is great. If you've got a teaser dropping, move it. If you have a song dropping on Spotify, you're boned. You just have to put it out. And there's been occasions this year where there was an ill-timed something. I can't actually even think of the specific example, but whatever it was, soft launched on Spotify. We just didn't say anything, and we moved our press blast to the following week, just to avoid whatever was on that day. I forget again. I forget the reason for that one, but you just have to remain flexible where you can. Especially if you think it's just going to get lost, because you don't want to waste assets, especially if you're spending time and resources on those assets.
I think the flexibility is an important thing. Like, well, I mean, I think an election, I mean, we might not have been able to predict what happened last week, but we didn't really have much going on last week. But there are certain things with a pandemic as well, when you just never know when the bad news is gonna come. So
avoid Thanksgiving and Christmas. For the love of all that is holy, do not put things out around holidays. I've seen people tweet about this, but all the ideas about releasing albums and singles around Christmas and Thanksgiving, I can nearly guarantee you are from managers and bands. There's no one at a record label that wants to do this. Apple doesn't want to deal with new music. They have extended timelines for delivery dates. People, this is our time to take a break and do housekeeping. So chill out, man. We're tired. This has been a year.
If you want, if people want more information on this, you can go to our YouTube channel. This is a good place to plug it. It's called Music Biz. We put out a video yesterday all about the upcoming industry slowdown, which this year is roughly December 18th through January 9th, which is when nobody wants to hear.
I was going to say November 18th.
Next Wednesday through January 9th, if possible. I give people, I give a little more room, but you're absolutely right. I always tell people that if they're looking at a release calendar, trying to find the right date to drop an album, and they find a week like last week, what I think was the 6th, if you look at something and it's like, wow, there's nothing coming out on November 6th, take a breath and ask yourself why nothing is coming out.
I saw a band drop an album around Christmas last year. My response was, dude, go to hell. That is a dick move for everybody. It really is. Unless it's a Christmas album, hit the bricks, man. I definitely saw a big push for a record that there's that Tuesday that sometimes falls right after Christmas before New Year's. We were like, what are we doing right now, guys? Like, why are we announcing things? What do you want me to do? And then they're like, dude, where's all the press? On vacation, man. They're doing their year-end issues. They don't care about your record right now. Bad move. Radio stations are playing Christmas music.
I've already gotten at least 4 PR agencies or labels being like, here's our year in review for your consideration. So this is like the deadline is hitting now. Once I start getting here's everything that we've done this year, it's over.
It's crazy how fast podcasts like this go. Next question. Who do we get to? Let's get to some people.
All right, next question. Very quickly. Easy one that you guys probably hear a dozen times a week, which is just, where are you finding bands? If I have a band, I think we're as good as the bands on your label. How do I get you to actually take a listen to my music?
I have a quick answer. I'll try to make it fast. This is rapid fire. People say entertainment's about who you know, and that's partially correct. But it's the same thing as saying jobs are often, when you get a job, it's referrals. That's what we're talking about. If we're going to put our money behind somebody, we want to know that they're not bogus. So more often than not, we hear about bands from like Trevor from Black Dahlia, Alex from Cannibal Corpse, the list goes on, or other managers and agents, and sometimes random submissions. It really depends. I found a band from Wisconsin based on a Facebook post that someone my old band used to play with, his old band, said, hey, this band's amazing. And I was like, this guy's legit. We talked to him. They're a great band. We signed them. So it's being present, putting out really cool content, and being active in your local scene as much as you can. Because if you're cool to work with and you put out good stuff, it's just going to build over time. If your music doesn't suck and you're cool to work with, it'll build.
I agree with that. I do also think that submitting your music is, we're going to read your email most of the time. But I think that when you're sending that email, there are certainly some things to consider. And one of them is to be aware that you're actually pitching yourself, that if you write into Prosthetic and saying you want to be on Prosthetic, give us some context as to why. And that demonstrates it's not just a copy and paste email apart from anything else. But also have all of your ducks in a row before you do that. Even if your album is not yet recorded or whatever, that's fine. But if you want us to check you out, we're going to go and look at your Facebook or your Instagram or see who you are and what sort of world you exist in. One of the first things I do when I look at stuff is, I don't use Facebook that much, but when I go on Facebook and I look at a band, I see which of my friends like that band already, and that kind of gives me a good indicator, like, oh, how did I miss this band? Loads of people like them, or no one's ever heard of them. Like, so yeah, make sure that you've got everything lined up. You want to be seen, so we're going to go and look at you and make sure that what we're seeing is you in your best light, I think.
Your YouTube channel, Facebook page, Twitter, Bandcamp, that is your press kit.
Yeah.
That's your press kit. If that's not in order, what do we have to go on?
Yeah.
Okay, let's keep moving. In terms of helping a band get a lot of traction, what has more value? A co-sign from another artist or really good press engagement, whether it be Rolling Stone versus having somebody, one of a similar band that's much larger, say something nice about them on Twitter? What do you think has more value?
Another artist.
I
love it.
Yeah, I think another artist certainly will put more eyes on your band immediately. But I do think of course I'm going to say there's value in a good, press. It's my job.
Of course.
But I do think they serve different purposes as well. Some of it is, well, they both are like, it's, a seal of approval one way or another, isn't it? And it just depends who is looking at each of those things, who you're going to reach. But yeah, they both have value, definitely.
I've seen both have, press is obviously kind of the default rollout. I've seen the cosign approach being taken a little bit more frequently as of late. And I think that it's a high value get if you can get like a really good mention from somebody.
Yeah, definitely.
At least build your followers.
Yeah.
All right, moving on. You're speaking strictly to the world of heavier music, metal and the like. What is more valuable to drive traffic to, your Bandcamp page or your streaming pages like Spotify, Apple Music, Google, etc.?
Bandcamp.
I love the Bandcamp love. Becky?
I think Bandcamp too. I think the tools that are there for you as a band, whether you're signed or not, are great. And I think they enable you to build a two-way relationship with your fan base more so than.
If I were still in a band, I would be making sure everything's set up properly on Spotify and Apple Music with those artist portals that they do provide. But the lion's share of my time would be driving people to Bandcamp.
Love it. In terms of what you think works better, Vince, we know how you feel about Twitch already. Do you think artists should be pursuing YouTube channels or podcasts if they want to have this extra kind of regularly produced piece of content?
I don't think most people have the technical prowess to be able to set up a podcast properly with RSS feeds and the like, make your podcast your YouTube channel and add it to the content you're already putting there.
Look at this guy here.
Hey.
Hey.
Why go through the process of trying to get your podcast on Apple Music when you could just put it on YouTube for now, and if it grows, figure that part out later.
Great. Becky, do you have a preference?
I mean, I was gonna say that I just kind of think that whichever feels the most, I think there's got to be authenticity behind anything that you do when you're putting yourself out there. So if you're like, for example, if you're comfortable talking and you're great at interviewing people, or, you know, sharing your opinion in a very clear way, great. If you don't want to be on camera, then maybe a podcast where people can't look at you is going to be more comfortable. And like, if you force yourself to be on camera and you're not into it, then people will pick up on it. So I think, like, sometimes I think you have to push yourself to put yourself out there, but you kind of know your own boundaries about like what's comfortable and what's not. So whichever suits you better, I think is gonna.
Use your YouTube channel to drive people to Twitch. Use your YouTube channel to promote your podcast. And why start a podcast? There's a million. Do something different. Be on a podcast. Don't start one. You don't want to own a boat. You want a friend that has a boat. You don't want to be scraping barnacles off the deck. That's an old Bill Burr bit, but it applies.
Yeah, you don't want to own a boat. That's true. I actually quote that all the time. I've never thought to use it in this situation. Here we go. Okay, moving on. We got time for one more, and then we'll do some plugs, and we'll let everyone get on with your day. Obviously, there's a lot of people that watch this that are in bands. The other half of people are always trying to be a part of this music business. Now, I don't want anyone to take either of your jobs because you're both very talented at what you do. Well, let's answer the other question you probably get all the time, which is I'm in music business school. I want to work in the music business. Who do I reach out to? What do I do? What's the best path to follow? Now, Vince, before you answer, I know your story at least you've worked at other labels. You've kind of worked your way up through the game a little bit. Becky, I don't know your path. I assume it's a little bit similar, but when people give you the, like, how do I kick in the door? What's the way to kick in the door these days with record labels specifically, let's say?
Well, recently we were looking for a publicist at Prosthetic to work alongside me, and it's actually quite difficult to find someone with some experience. They didn't have to be super experienced, but find somebody with some experience and some common sense. And I won't, I know we're short on time, so I won't go on about it a lot, but when I started, I knew I wanted to work in the music business, which I guess a lot of people have this idea. I thought I wanted to book tours, then I realized I really didn't. And I kind of fell into being a publicist. The first band that I worked with properly was Anunathrak, who now is one of Vince's. I'm not saying they wouldn't be where they are now without me, but but like I kind of just found my own way and found something that like suited me, and I started working. I worked with them. They were a reasonable sized band at the time, but I also worked with a lot of small bands and found my footing. I didn't know how to do PR before I started doing it. I made it up as I went along, and it turned out fine. And I didn't know how to get. When I was working on my first Anunathrak record, they said, "Do you think anyone would put us on the cover of a magazine?" I'm like, "I'll ask them." And I asked, and I got my first magazine cover. So, like, I do think there is something to be said for just finding your own path, like trying stuff out, like working with your friends' bands, getting a feel for what works for you, and then don't underestimate the experience that you can bring from other areas as well. Before I was a publicist, I was an administrator at a university, and the organizational skills that I got there, I definitely use every single day. So you can get, nothing you have learned in life is not, relevant. It can all be transferable.
I would answer that question with, what do you like to do? And if you can't answer that, then there's your first problem. I want to work in music. Well, do you want to be a road crew? Do you want to be a publicist? What's your end game here? I went through college radio, went to school for business at a regular public university. I happened into this through college radio. Most people I know in the music business, agents, the big booking agents in metal, they didn't go to school for this. They booked their friends' bands, hardcore tours in the 90s. Very few people go to school for this. I would be very careful about where you pay to go to school. Watch out for people that sell the dream. They're often grifters. So be careful.
I kind of think that there are definitely people that would take advantage of this, but I kind of think you almost have to be willing to do it for free. I'm not saying you should do it for free, but so at the beginning of the pandemic, when stuff started going haywire, I remember speaking to EJ, one of the guys that runs Prosthetic, and saying, look, if you need to make me redundant, I understand, but I'm probably going to keep doing the work anyway, because I was just like, I could not imagine what I would be doing for this year if there was no work to do. And he was like, all right, calm down, no one's being made redundant. But like, that's the way I felt about it, that like, if the job was taken away, I would be looking to do it somehow still. So I'm not saying that you should be looking to work somewhere for free, or people should be exploiting that, but I think there's like, if you have that drive that you want to do it, then you're going to find a way to do it. Like, yeah,
if you want to do it and you don't know anybody in your local scene or anybody at your local venues or who's booking shows on a small basis, then you're already, what are you doing? You're not part of the scene. You become part of the music scene by being in the music scene, by just kind of doing it. You do it because you want to, not because you're like, oh man, I'll get a job at a label someday. Like I said, I'm here kind of by accident.
Yeah. And these are great answers. And we are out of time. So we're going to real quick let everyone give some plugs. Now, before I let you two go, because you have much more exciting information than me probably, I just want to say that this has been a production of Haulix.com. Haulix Live is a series. We do it every couple of weeks. I think we might have one more in us before the end of 2020, and we'll probably stretch this into 2021 because everyone seems like we're going to all be home for a while. If you go to haulixdaily.com, you can find all the information about this. And if you need even more content with my voice, then you can go ahead and check out our podcast, Inside Music, or our addiction series, High Notes. Or if you want to see my voice, hear my voice and see my face, we have a YouTube channel. It's called Music Biz. I'm all over the internet representing Haulix, talking about all things music business. So if you like this content, you'll probably like some of that content. We'd love for you to check it out. Now I want to pass it back to where we began. Becky, you first. Well, how can people keep up with you? What's going on at Prosthetic? What should we be looking out for? Give us your spiel.
Oh man. Okay, we've got one more album to come out this year, which is Gamma Bomb, which is out the first week in December. But we have plenty coming up next year. There'll be new music from Wolf King, Wrist Meat Razor, Depths of Hatred, Atlas Moth. We have some exciting new signings, Summoning the Lich, and Pupil Slicer, which, can we just take a second to appreciate the name Pupil Slicer? Yeah, you can keep up with everything that Prosthetic is doing. We're on all the social media, Prosthetic Records. Yeah, we've got free samplers on Bandcamp. You can go and check them out, and you can definitely get a feel for what we're doing and the bands that we're putting out and we're working with. And if you really want to find me, you can probably find me through those socials. But I can't think why you would. Follow the label instead.
I love it. And I'll also say Summoning the Lich is really great. They have recently put out a video for the song Descend. You can watch it on YouTube right now. It's great. Vince, what do you guys got going on?
Metalblade.com. Our release schedule is dense as always. It's almost like our bands just never stop doing things. What I can say is 2021 is going to be extremely busy the first 2 quarters from everybody. Kind of maybe emerging from this, I don't know. But we just put out Nuclear Power Trio. That's the one record I'll mention. It's an EP. It's Kim Jong-un, Donald Trump, and Vladimir Putin playing cool fusion metal songs. What's not to like? Subscribe to your favorite band's newsletters. Buy your favorite band's albums on Bandcamp. The bands you want to hear from, make it easy to hear information from them. It's easier for everybody. That's the drop I'll do.
I love it. It's so good. Okay. Well, thank you two for being here. This has been really fun. It went by super fast.
Thanks,
and thank you everybody that's been watching on Facebook. Thank you everyone that stuck around with us on Zoom. It's always nice to have you here. Again, haulixdaily.com to check out all of our upcoming events, haulix.com to learn more about our promotional distribution platform. We have a major update coming out this weekend. I think you're going to love it. I won't go into it here because I've already kept you for over an hour. But again, thank you, Vince. Thank you, Becky. Everyone, have a safe, good week. Stay home. Don't go out. Listen to music.